So you're in the final weeks of your pregnancy. Things are getting real. The focus kind of shifts, right? It goes from being all about growth to being about, well, logistics. And the biggest question on every parent's mind is my baby in the right position for delivery? Today, we are going to break down everything you need to know about fetal positioning.
As you head into what doctors sometimes call the delivery month, we're talking those super important weeks between 34 and 37. It's all about getting ready for the big day. The conversation totally shifts from how much your baby is growing to where they're positioned for their grand entrance. In other words, have they turned head down?
Now, before any anxiety starts to creep in, let's just start with a really reassuring number. The vast majority of babies, we're talking 95% of them, they just figure this out. By 37 weeks, they've maneuvered themselves into that perfect head-down position, all on their own. It's pretty amazing.
So what happens if your latest scan shows a baby who's still bottom down, or what's known as breech? What if you find yourself in that remaining 5%? Well, this is where the game plan changes. We move from just watching and waiting to some serious, proactive, evidence-based planning. To really get why this all happens, it helps to think of the uterus as a kind of high-tech, pear-shaped suitcase. It's wider at the top and gets narrower down at the bottom. Now, your baby's bottom and legs are a bit bulkier than their head, so they naturally drift towards the roomier section, up at the top of the uterus. It really is just simple physics.
Let's dig into the mechanics of it all. In that optimal vertex, or head-down position, the baby's hard, smooth skull acts like a perfect little wedge. With every contraction, it presses down evenly on the cervix, helping it to open up. But a breech baby, well, they're sitting on the cervix, and that softer bottom just isn't as good at getting the job done. It's just not as efficient.
And then there's this other position. It's less common, but really important to know about, the transverse lie. This is where the baby is lying horizontally, kind of like a little bridge across your belly. In this case, there's no presenting part, not the head, not the bottom, engaged in the pelvis. For everyone's safety, a vaginal delivery is just medically impossible, and a planned C-section is absolutely the required route.
Okay, so the 36-week mark, that's the crucial checkpoint. This is when your care team really shifts gears from just observing to active planning. If the baby is still breech by now, it's officially time to create an action plan. Here's a quick look at how the timeline plays out. Up to about 34 weeks, your baby has plenty of amniotic fluid. It's like their own personal swimming pool, so they can do a full 180-degree flip if they want. But by 36 or 37 weeks, that space gets a lot tighter. This becomes the key decision point for what to do next, all leading toward a planned, safe delivery around 39 weeks.
Now for the good news. If your baby hasn't turned yet, there are proactive, medically sound steps that you and your doctor can take. You are not just a passive bystander here. So let's take a look at the options.
First up, we have a procedure called an external cephalic version, or ECV for short. The best way to think of it is a manual U-turn for the baby. It's done in a hospital, with an ultrasound to guide the way, and an obstetrician will use their hands on the outside of your belly to gently encourage the baby to do a little somersault into the head-down position. So, what are the chances it actually works? Well, you can think of an ECV as kind of a coin toss. The success rate is about 50-50. But here's the key insight. Even if the attempt is unsuccessful, it gives your doctor a ton of valuable information. It tells them about your baby's mobility and helps confirm what the safest delivery plan is moving forward.
Now, an ECV isn't for everyone. Doctors look at some very specific criteria to make sure it's a safe option for you. They'll measure the amount of amniotic fluid, that's the AFI, to make sure there's enough liquid for the baby to turn. They also check the placenta's location and make sure the baby isn't already locked in deep into the pelvis.
You can also be proactive at home by making gravity your ally. We're talking about simple exercises, like leaning forward over a birth ball, or doing some gentle pelvic tilts on all fours, kind of like cat-cow stretches. This can help change the shape of the suitcase, encouraging the baby's heavy back to rotate towards your front, which is often the first step in them turning all the way head down. Of course, with pregnancy comes a lot of advice, right? Some of it's helpful, and some of it not so much. So let's tackle a few common myths, especially some you might hear in the Indian context, and separate them from the medical reality. All right, first up, the food myth. You might hear people say that certain heat-inducing foods will make the baby turn. The reality? Your baby's position is a question of physics and space, not your diet. Nutrition is for growth and energy, not for changing your baby's orientation. So please, just stick to your healthy, high-protein diet. There is no magic food that's going to trigger a turn.
This also brings up the whole more is not better thing.
The idea that walking for hours on end will somehow force the baby's head down is a really common myth that honestly just leads to exhaustion. The official recommendation is 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity a week. Quality of movement and good posture are way more important than just the number of steps you take.
Okay, let's start to wrap this up by focusing on what matters most. The modern medical safety net that we have that ensures a safe arrival for your baby, regardless of what position they're in.
If your baby is breech, there are a few specific warning signs you should know. First, if your water breaks in a big gush, it's really important to lie down and get to the hospital. That's because a breech baby doesn't plug the cervix as well, creating a small risk of the umbilical cord slipping out first. Second, always pay attention to your baby's movements. And finally, you have to report any persistent upper abdominal pain to your doctor.
It is so important to remember this. Having a breech baby is not a failure. It is simply a different path on the exact same journey. The goal has not changed one bit. It is and always will be about a healthy parent and a healthy baby.
And, this quote from the source material really says it all. In modern obstetricians, the #1 priority is always a safe exit over any kind of normal label. If a baby decides to stay breech, a planned C-section is a calm, controlled, and wonderfully safe way to finally meet them. It's not a backup plan, it's just the right plan for a safe welcome.